There are ink marks on the skin, seemingly mere decoration, until they awaken an entire past that had lain dormant. A young woman is shoved to the ground in a supermarket. A group mocks the tattoo on her wrist, and they have no idea. They have just touched the memories of fallen warriors. When the old Marine Corps general slowly lifts his hand off the shopping cart, the entire store freezes. They don't know, but he does, and he has never forgotten. This is a story that will make you stop and reflect. Could a small tattoo alter the fate of an entire day, even a person's life? When a group of arrogant bikers insults a black woman in the middle of a crowded supermarket, they could never imagine that the ink on her wrist hides a past they should never have stirred. An aged general, thought to have left the battlefield behind, is forced to rise to defend something sacred that cannot be trampled. Do you believe a single glance could freeze an entire supermarket? If you've listened this far, pause for a moment. Comment 1 and let us know where and when you're watching. It's amazing to journey with viewers from around the world. There are days when all one wants is to hide in simplicity. No summons, no past, no need for anyone to know who you are. And he, Ethan Cole, chose that afternoon to be just an ordinary man. Ethan Cole chose to live that way. A Marine Corps general who'd left the service, laid down his rifle, removed his insignia, and folded the years of battle into a compartment of memory that no one dared touch. In his 70s, all he wished for was peace in the days that remained. That afternoon, pale gold sunlight draped the parking lot of a small supermarket on the outskirts of Virginia. Rays stretched like thin silk, falling softly on the roofs of weathered cars, settling on the shoulders of hurried shoppers wrapping up their day. A strange stillness filled the air. Only the chatter of birds, the scrape of cartwheels on tile, and the faint murmur of conversation, like the gentle breath of everyday life. Ethan pushed his cart slowly, threading through familiar aisles. He picked up a carton of milk, selected a few loaves of bread, considered some fruit. These were small rituals, repeated week after week, a way to remind himself he still belonged to this world. Though much of him lay somewhere far away, on nameless battlefields, he had once been a man whom entire regiments looked up to, the decision-maker in campaigns never spoken of in evening news, one who danced between life and death so often that his heart sometimes forgot what trembling felt like. But all of that he left behind. Now, he wanted only to be an old man like any other, shopping for groceries, savoring a morning coffee, tending a few potted plants on his porch. He didn't want anyone to recognize him. He didn't need salutes. He didn't want eyes upon him for a title long outdated. His wartime had ended. This quiet, this little peace in a supermarket, was the most precious gift he'd ever given himself after a lifetime of storms. But life seldom grants lasting peace. Some things, no matter how deeply buried, find a way back. Some pasts, thought dead and gone, wait for a reason to awaken. That windless afternoon was the threshold. He didn't know that in mere minutes, a tiny event, truly insignificant, would pull him from the calm he'd fought to preserve. A bump that seemed harmless, a comment that appeared thoughtless, would stir the memories he had so carefully tried to forget. He didn't know that in just a few steps, his heart would have to beat again to the rhythm of those old years. Perhaps deep down, a part of him always knew that men like him, those who once stood on the edge of life and death, rarely are permitted lasting tranquility. There are tests in life that don't come on battlefields. No gunfire, no falling bombs. There are silent tests, arriving on the quietest days, in the most unexpected places. And that afternoon, in that small supermarket, among ordinary aisles, life chose Ethan Cole once more. The collision rang out, jarring and sudden. It shattered the supermarket's once peaceful air. Shoppers glanced over briefly, then quickly looked away, as if they were used to steering clear of trouble that wasn't theirs. Ethan Cole stood frozen. His hand tightened on the cart's handle. His gaze followed the young woman who had been shoved to the floor before him. In that fleeting moment, a strange sensation stirred within him. She, a slender black woman, her hair neatly braided at the nape, stood just ahead of Ethan in the checkout line. On her wrist was a small tattoo, a series of indecipherable symbols, as though someone had carelessly scrawled ink upon her skin. 3 loud, arrogant bikers elbowed their way forward. Their heavy boots and swagger proclaimed ownership of the space. Their faded leather jackets bore skull motifs. Their eyes were predatory, accustomed to dominating others. They ignored the line of waiting customers. They disregarded every observing glance. They shoved the woman aside, as if she had no right to be there. The tallest among them deliberately barreled into her. She staggered and fell, her basket clattering across the cold tile. Groceries spilled at the feet of nearby patrons, yet no one bent to help. The biker knelt. He grabbed her wrist with rough force, lifting her arm as though it were disposable. His broad finger pointed at the tiny tattoo, a mocking smirk on his lips. "What's this? Pointless ink? A barcode for your coffee can?" His voice rang out. He made sure everyone could hear. The other 2 erupted in cold, contemptuous laughter. But their hateful taunts that followed were worse, vulgar words laced with racism. They spared no subtlety. They displayed their scorn openly, white men belittling a lone black woman. "Black girls like you belong at the back. Don't line up with us." They flung each insult like a knife, cold and ruthless. No one intervened. The onlookers averted their eyes, eager to finish their purchases and leave, as if lingering too long would make them targets too. But what stunned Ethan was not the biker's brutality, nor the crowd's indifference. It was her response. She did not cry. She did not protest. She did not snap back. She quietly stooped to gather each fallen item. She collected them in a defiant silence. Her small hands retrieved each item. Her slender shoulders did not tremble. Her gaze, calm and undisturbed like a glassy lake. Perhaps she was used to such blows. Perhaps she had grown accustomed to contemptuous stares and venomous words, to the point where nothing could hurt her any further. But Ethan could not grow accustomed. Something within him trembled, an unfamiliar heartbeat, a feeling both ancient and profound. And then his eyes locked on the tattoo at her wrist, where the ink remained vivid. A tattoo that seemed meaningless. Yet to Ethan, it was a symbol he could never forget. His body stiffened, his aging heart constricted. A memory he had buried deep, something he thought belonged forever to the past, surged back in a single, electrifying instant. There are symbols that seem like mere ink, yet they possess the power to awaken a part of memory long asleep. Ethan Cole stood motionless amid the crowd, their voices, the scanner's beep, the cartwheel's creak, all fading to muffled echoes in his ears. His hand gripped the cart handle. His thin, veined fingers trembled, not from age, but because his heart had just skipped a beat. His gaze fixed on the small tattoo on the young woman's wrist, those scattered symbols the bikers had mocked as a cheap joke. But to Ethan, it was an unmistakable code. Bravo 9, Charlie 3. A string of characters meaningless to most, yet for him, it was etched to the bone. The code name for Operation Shadow Spear, a top-secret mission, Ethan had directly commanded over 15 years ago. A mission so classified that, even now, among senior officers, it existed only in whispered fragments during closed-door briefings. That operation was never fully documented, its participants nearly erased from military records. A battlefield no history book would ever admit. And yet, here, on an ordinary afternoon in a small Virginia supermarket, he saw that code, clear as day, on the wrist of a complete stranger. A slender black woman, calm-eyed as a still lake, quietly gathering her fallen groceries. She said no word, offered no protest, issued no pleas. Her silence rendered the biker's rage pointless. How could she bear that code? How could someone so young know of a mission he believed buried with the soldiers who never returned? Ethan's heart stuttered. The feeling rose. That unease, that compulsion, that vague dread only a war survivor knows, when the past suddenly materializes before you. He stepped back, his eyes never leaving the tattoo. His mind was yanked back to those old days, when comrades addressed each other by code names, when oaths of life and death were inked onto skin, not for show, but as a vow to remember. Not everyone has the right to wear that symbol. Not everyone understands the weight of that ink. And yet she, silent, unresisting, bore a mark only true warriors dared to engrave on their flesh. A question pierced Ethan's mind, twisting with each heartbeat. Who left that code on her? Her father? One of his old comrades? Or had she herself once stood on a battlefield he never knew? He had no answer, but he knew this could not be coincidence. It couldn't be. Ethan's grip tightened. A chill ran down his spine. For a moment, he felt dragged back to the battlefield, where he made life and death decisions, traded comrades' lives, and vowed never to forget those who fell. And perhaps it was time to keep that vow. What about you? Can you guess what happens next? It would be great if you'd comment, "I'm still here," to join us on this journey. There are moments when no shout is needed to still the air. A single glance can freeze time. As Ethan Cole lifted his hand from the cart and stepped forward, the entire supermarket seemed to halt. All surrounding sounds were swallowed. The scanners beep. The wheels scrape on tile. Even the murmur of voices faded. The atmosphere thickened, grew heavy. He stopped, facing the towering biker, the man who had just knocked down the young woman, the one who spat cruel mockery. Ethan needed no raised voice. He simply stared straight at him, his gaze fathomless, cold as steel forged in war. "Do you realize whom you have just touched?" His tone was low, measured, not loud yet resonating like a drumbeat against the chest. The crowd jolted. They didn't understand, but they sensed the gravity of the moment. The biker laughed, feigning arrogance. He shrugged, as if before him stood nothing more than an old man oblivious to his own limits. "Old-timer, mind your own business." But before he could finish, Ethan raised his hand. A subtle gesture, yet the biker froze, his grin stiffening. In that look, there was something he could not bear. Not because Ethan threatened him, not because Ethan acted fierce, but simply because that gaze, the gaze of one who has walked the brink of life and death, carried a weight of memories the likes of which the biker could never fathom. Ethan slowly pointed to the tattoo on the young woman's wrist. "This is not ink for show. This is a top-secret operation code. This is a vow carved into skin, not for outsiders to admire, but for those who faced death to never forget." The supermarket fell silent. Though few grasped the full meaning, they felt the shift in the air. Something sacred had been touched. Ethan turned to the young woman. His expression softened, as though seeking a fragment of the past within her. "Alpha Team or Bravo Team?" he asked quietly, yet with the solemnity of an interrogation on the battlefield. The young woman, still bent to collect her fallen items, lifted her head. For the first time she answered, her voice calm, steady, tinged with pride etched deep in her eyes. "I am Bravo Team." That brief reply froze the space. No one laughed now. No one dared move. Those nearby felt they had witnessed something beyond their understanding. They did not know what Bravo Team meant. They did not know the significance of that code, yet they sensed, clearly, that on this deceptively peaceful afternoon they had seen a moment few ever witness. A vow, a legacy, a silent history awakened with nothing more than a glance and a small tattoo on a wrist. There are encounters that seem random, yet are arranged by the invisible threads of memory. Some people appear in our lives not to exchange greetings, but to remind us of things we must never forget. Her name is Leah. A simple name, but to Ethan, when he learned the truth, it felt like a gentle touch on a scar he'd hidden for over 15 years. Leah is the daughter of Corporal Daniel Brooks, a soldier who once served directly under Ethan's command during Operation Shadow Spear. Daniel, the young soldier who always volunteered for the most dangerous tasks, the comrade who fell in a fierce ambush when Bravo Team was forced to withdraw without being able to rescue him. Ethan has never forgotten that day. It was the battle that haunted him for life. The day he stood before Daniel's wife and young daughter, empty-handed, and he made a promise, a vow he carved into his heart, that men like Daniel Brooks would never be forgotten. Yet deep inside, Ethan carried regret. For years, he feared he couldn't keep that promise. He worried that Daniel's name, the memories of Bravo Team, and the fallen would fade away with time, swept into the oblivion no one can escape. Until today's afternoon. Leah's tattoo is more than mere symbols. It is her father's legacy. It is the promise she inked on her skin to remind herself never to forget. An ink mark that needs no one's understanding, needs no one's approval, only she must know its meaning, and that is enough. Ethan felt it. In Leah, he saw Daniel's image, his resilience, his quiet strength, his unspoken perseverance. She needed no one to defend her. She needed no one to recognize her as a hero. She was accustomed to quietly gathering fallen items, as she was to bearing burdens others dismissed. But Leah is not only the keeper of a legacy, she is its continuation. Her life has been a silent journey. Leah served in a special forces unit, trained ruthlessly from a young age. She completed missions no one speaks of, carried out operations whose names even her comrades were forbidden to know. Silent feats, battles without gunfire, wounds no one ever saw. Those bikers, those who spat vile insults, had no idea they had just crossed paths with a silent warrior. They did not know that the woman they mocked was not just a black woman with ink on her wrist, but the living legacy of soldiers who had fallen. They had unwittingly touched something sacred, something they were never entitled to touch. Ethan stood there, his old heart pounding stronger than ever. He understood. He felt it. And he knew that Leah didn't need him to step in to protect her. But he had to. Not for vengeance, not to prove a point, but because of a promise. For some promises, no matter how many years pass, must be kept until one's last breath. And perhaps, this afternoon, in a small supermarket, amid what seemed a meaningless collision, was the moment he fulfilled that promise. Ethan Cole stood there, facing the bikers, his gaze unwavering, each word he spoke deliberate and soft as a whispering breeze. But in the hearts of those men, those words thundered like an unquenchable storm. I do not need to teach you manners. Apologize to her now if you do not. When you walk out of here, you will no longer be yourselves. A simple sentence, no grandiose threats, no ostentatious gestures. Yet the certainty in each syllable plunged the supermarket into absolute silence. The onlookers halted in mid-motion, even their breathing stopped. They did not understand everything, yet they sensed that something beyond their comprehension had just transpired. An undercurrent, silent yet fierce, was surging before their eyes. No one laughed. No one dared blink. The tallest biker, once brimming with arrogance, now stood with parched lips and a lump in his throat. He could not utter a word. The strong hand that had gripped Leah's wrist moments ago now hung limp, as if he suddenly realized he had touched something untouchable. Not because Ethan threatened him, not because Ethan acted with aggression, but because in that gaze, in that voice, lay something that transcended their world, something arrogant men like them had never encountered. Honor, memory, an unbreakable vow. A supermarket clerk nearby could no longer contain his astonishment. He stammered, voice trembling, "Sir, are you General Cole?" Ethan gave a slight nod. No further confirmation was needed. In that moment, as if a stone had been cast into a placid lake, ripples of silent awe spread through the entire store. Shoppers in line, customers selecting items, all froze. They understood that this silver-haired man was no ordinary elder. They recognized, slowly yet unmistakably, that before them stood one who had once altered the fate of entire battalions. One for whom the symbols on Leah's wrist were familiar. One who lived to uphold his vow to fallen comrades. The biker group fell silent, then bowed their heads. Their muttered apologies to Leah lacked any trace of arrogance. The mocking laughter, the hateful insults. Only confusion and fear lingered in their eyes. They did not know the full story, yet they felt they had crossed an inviolable line. Leah spoke quietly, her tone gentle, devoid of bitterness. "Go." No one stopped them. No one spoke another word. Yet as they turned to leave, the looks they cast back, fearful, ashamed, remained etched in that space. They departed, but their stain, the mark of that moment, would be forever engraved in the memories of those who witnessed it that day. For sometimes, one need not teach a lesson with force. Sometimes, a single glance, a single sentence, is enough to ensure that others never forget who you are. There are chance encounters that carry the weight of a milestone linking two destinies. There are ink marks that seem decorative, yet contain an entire life and a solemn vow. After it all, after the bikers departed, after the supermarket's atmosphere thawed as if never frozen, Ethan and Leah slipped away together. They did not hurry. Not a word was spoken on the short walk to the small cafe beside the store, a simple, unassuming corner where silence reigned, and one could hear the faint clink of a spoon against a cup. They chose a hidden table in the corner, where the day's last light filtered through thin glass, casting a warm, muted glow upon their shoulders. Ethan sat across from Leah. In his eyes, she was more than the young woman insulted in the supermarket. She was the living memory he had thought left behind on some distant battlefield. He spoke slowly, telling Leah about her father, Daniel Brooks, the soldier Ethan had never forgotten. Daniel was not the strongest in the unit, nor the highest ranking, but he was always the first to charge into the most dangerous place, where his comrades needed him most. He had volunteered to cover their retreat, and there he fell, forever, in that ambush so many years ago. Ethan chose his words carefully, as if afraid any misstep might tarnish the memory of his fallen comrade. He spoke of Daniel's courage, his sacrifice, the gentle smile he wore when patting a teammate's back before battle. Leah listened in silence. Tears welled in her eyes, tracing warm paths down her cheeks before falling. Perhaps in all her life, she had never heard so much of her father's story, tales absent from any military record, unchronicled on paper, yet the truest, most vivid memories of all. "I once promised." Ethan's voice deepened with emotion. "I promised never to forget men like your father." Leah looked up at him, her eyes moist. Her small hands gripped the coffee cup as if to hold on to the moment. "And you?" Ethan gave a gentle nod, his gaze softening. "You have helped me keep that promise." No further words were needed. They both understood. In that instant, Leah was no longer the solitary young woman, and Ethan no longer a silent old man. They were two souls from different generations, bound by invisible threads of honor, memory, and loyalty. They sat together for a long while, no need for many words. That quiet understanding was enough to encompass the depth of feeling between them. Before parting, Ethan gently took Leah's wrist, where the small ink mark still glowed. "That ink," he smiled, his eyes bright, "will never fade. It needs no one's understanding. Only you, knowing its importance, is enough." Leah bowed her head, speechless, yet her eyes shone with pride. Perhaps she never sought recognition, nor demanded understanding, but today she found someone who did. That afternoon, the little supermarket resumed its familiar rhythm. Carts rolled on, conversations resumed at the checkout, as if no wave had passed. But for those present that day, the story of a small ink mark would never fade from memory, because they witnessed something remarkable, the moment an old soldier rose not to teach a lesson, but to honor a promise. For some scars are not on the skin, but etched deep in the heart. Some ink needs no one's comprehension, no one's approval, but alone can unite strangers into comrades, soulmates in a shared ideal. And in life, sometimes all it takes is a single glance, a gentle reminder, to change the way one walks the rest of their journey. Do you believe that among the ordinary people around us, silent stories like Leah's and Ethan's may be unfolding? How many ink marks have we inadvertently overlooked? If you've listened this far, pause and leave a comment 1 if you'd like us to share more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe, and let us know where and when you're watching. We're thrilled to journey with you from around the world. Share this story if you believe these quiet ink marks deserve to be heard. A story truly lives on only when it is shared, understood, and remembered.